Hey, sweet babies. Know what time it is? It's dinner time. Hey, what's up? Here we go. Our last video looking at Hitler's control of Germany. So let's continue on. So in the last video, you should have seen the Beer Hall Putsch, right? The first attempt to take over of power by the Nazis. You would have seen how it failed, right? And we discussed how Hitler used the trial and his jailing to make it into a positive situation. And then we looked at a bunch of propaganda related to the Nazis. We discussed anti-Semitism a little bit. We looked at the scapegoating of the Jew. We looked at the effective way in which propaganda was able to speak to the people of Germany. So what we're going to do here, guys, is look at how that noose of control continues to get tightened around the people of Germany until eventually in 1933, March being the month, we see Hitler and the Nazis gain absolute power in Germany. So the consolidation of Hitler's power. When we talk about the consolidation of power, we're talking about how Germany ultimately goes from one of the most open and tolerant societies in the world in the 1920s to becoming Nazi Germany, which clearly is not one of the most open and tolerant societies in the world. So it goes like this. So first thing we're going to see is Hitler's appointed Chancellor, which is the number 2 position in Germany after the election in December of 1932. So January 1933, the next month, what happens is Hitler is given that number 2 position behind the president. We'll talk about who he is, what he did. Then there's a fire at the German Reichstag, and that quickly sees another election in March of 1933. After that, Hitler passes the Enabling Act, and then the president Hindenburg dies, and then we see the dictatorship of Hitler with basically no one there to check his power, set in stone. So let's talk about these different things, and then we'll be all done. All right, so Hitler being appointed Chancellor. So guys, please understand, in Weimar Germany, this is still Weimar Germany. Technically, Germany is still a liberal democracy. In Weimar Germany, the number 1 position is president. The number 2 position is chancellor. So we looked at how, as time went on post 1929, how the Nazis were gaining more and more political significance in Germany. Before 1929, the Nazis meant nothing. But after 1929, we see in the 1930 election how the Nazis became much more important. Now, the president of Germany, a guy by the name of Paul von Hindenburg, recognizes the importance of Hitler and the Nazis to passing legislation in Germany. The job of government is to pass legislation which should be making people's lives better. So what happens is von Hindenburg, recognizing the importance of the Nazis in the German Reichstag, decides that in order to get things done, to get the business of governing complete, what he's going to do is give Hitler that number 2 position in Germany. And this is an image of the morning of January 30th, 1930. That is the president on the left wearing the old Prussian helmet. That is President Paul von Hindenburg. And that is Hitler shaking his hand there on the right. Now, 28 days after Hitler is appointed Chancellor, there is a fire at the Reichstag. Someone sets this national monument, their parliament, this symbol of German democracy, on fire, right? And Hitler, being the opportunist that he is, he uses this as an opportunity to convince Germans that German democracy is under attack. Terrorists want to destroy Germany, and we got to hit them and hit them back hard. And basically what Hitler does from this point forward, guys, is try to convince people of Germany that he is the only guy who can bring order to this sort of crazy Germany now that they've been attacked. Please understand, guys, like the Reichstag being set ablaze is kind of akin to, let's say, like the Parliament Hill shooting here in Canada, where an armed gunman back in, I think it was like 2014, stormed Parliament Hill and shot a few people, right? It's akin to like the 9/11 attacks in the United States of America. This is a really big deal. Now, who set the fire? Historians disagree. Some historians suggest that it was actually Hitler and the Nazis who set the fire. Because let's think about this. If you want to provoke a situation where you can use a crisis to try to gain more power, this would maybe be that perfect opportunity. Now, Hitler and the Nazis say that they caught a Dutch communist around the Reichstag building after the fire. This person confesses to the crime, is found guilty, and this person is hanged by the neck. Sorry about that. Dishwasher's running. Okay, let's continue. So, Dutch communist is caught and he confesses to the fire. Now, if I was a betting man, I would think that this is the sort of opportunity that governments love to utilize, right? You use a crisis in order to gain something from it. And after 9/11, of course, we see the American government pass the Patriot Act, which increases the power and the surveillance capability of the American government. Here in Canada, after the Parliament Hill shooting, we get the federal government passing something called the anti-terror legislation, which also increases the surveillance power of government. And as we'll see, guys, the Reichstag Fire sort of plants the seeds for the passing of the Enabling Act less than a month later. All right, so this is an image of the German Reichstag on fire. The roof is on fire. Okay, so like 6 days later now, there's another election held, right? And on the 5th of March, 1933, we see the Nazis gain their biggest amassment or allotment of power here. So the Nazis receive 44% of the popular vote amongst the 6 major political parties. Now the question is, who lost in order for the Nazis to gain so much? Well, remember, Hitler and the Nazis said that a Dutch communist set the fire to the German Reichstag. So the left loses ground and the right, the far right, the Nazis, gain ground. And this election, guys, is the last election in Germany, the last election under the Weimar Republic, and it is a dictatorship from basically a few weeks down the road up until 1945. So the Enabling Act. So it was passed. Dishwasher again. Here we go. Okay, the Enabling Act. So 18 days after the election on the 5th of March, 1933, we see Hitler and the Nazis continue to try to convince the people of Germany. Remember, it is still a Weimar socialist liberal democracy on the morning of March 23rd, 1933. So Hitler and the Nazis used the Reichstag fire in order to basically sell this narrative of fear and how we, the Nazis, are the only ones who can bring order and security back to Germany. So what happens, guys, on the morning of the 23rd of March, 1933, delegates of the German Reichstag walk into the German Reichstag, which is now, by the way, at an opera house down the street, because let's face it, the Reichstag's been burnt to the ground. So they walk in to the opera house as a liberal democratic state, and they walk out that day as a Nazi dictatorship. So Hitler's able to convince the people of Germany and the delegates in the Reichstag, right, the people who represent the people of Germany, that, you know, this is the only way we can return order and the only way in which we can have security restored back to Germany. So the Enabling Act, guys, basically what it does is it suspends the rights and freedoms guaranteed in the German Constitution, right? And it is passed with a lot of intimidation. And eventually what it does is it cements Hitler's total grip on power. So on this slide, folks, there is a video at the bottom here that sort of demonstrates how this goes. I would encourage you to make sure you watch this. So guys, with the Enabling Act, basically it's in effect for 4 years. It has something called a sunset clause. This sunset clause basically says that, you know, this temporary piece of legislation will run out after 4 years in which it is invoked, kind of like the American Patriot Act, actually. And if the government wants, before that 4-year sunset clause, they can actually invoke it again if the emergency is still going on. And you'll never guess, before that 4 years is up, what Hitler and the Nazis do. They invoke it again, right? So it's in effect for 8 years, and before the second term of the Enabling Act, they invoke it one more time, and that gives us basically the full 12 years of Hitler's control. So guys, what I want you to understand is that Hitler didn't seize power in Germany. It was given to him on a silver platter. The German Reichstag actually voted their democracy away. Not smart, right? Not smart. But desperate times call for desperate measures. When things are chaotic, people do anything to restore sanity and order back when times are chaotic. And that's basically what happens here in Germany. So a quick summary of the Enabling Act: it suspends civil liberties guaranteed by the German Constitution. It gives Hitler total power. He becomes the dictator of Germany legally through fear and political manipulation. What fear? The fear of communism, the fear of terrorism, and other things like that. So yeah, Germany chose to suspend their democracy and give Hitler absolute power. He did not seize power. It was not a coup like in Russia in 1917 with the October Revolution. It was given to him on a silver platter. And Joseph Goebbels, Nazi propaganda minister, says the authority of the Führer has now been wholly established. Votes are no longer taken. The Führer decides. So this is an actual image of the day in which Hitler goes in front of the German Reichstag and basically says, we're proposing to you this thing called the Enabling Act. You must support it, right? 44% of the Reichstag gets up and supports it. They start singing Deutschland über alles, which means Germany above all others. And the other delegates, the other 56% of the Reichstag membership, stands up slowly and starts to accept it as well in this grand display of German patriotism. And then the last check on Hitler's power dies. So on the 2nd of August, 1934, President Paul von Hindenburg, I mentioned earlier that it was President Hindenburg and then Chancellor Hitler right there like that. Once Hindenburg dies, and he died of natural causes, by the way. He wasn't murdered. He wasn't poisoned. Nothing like that. Nothing nefarious going on here. But when Hindenburg dies at the age of 86, it is significant for the reason being that Hindenburg is the last possible check on Hitler's power. Once Hindenburg dies, what Hitler does is because of the power given to him by the Enabling Act, he is able to abolish the office of the presidency, and now Chancellor is that #1 position. There's nobody above him, right? And no one can oppose him anymore because Hitler rules at this point by decree, and his dictatorship is effectively set at this point. Now, with that dictatorship set, right, the times keep rolling on here. By June of 1934, Hitler decides that it is time to get rid of possible opponents to his power. Now understand, guys, Nazi Germany is a single party dictatorship, but Hitler is worried that there is possible dissenters in the Nazi government who maybe want to try to take his power away from him. When we looked at the Soviet Union, we talked about how how Stalin purged individuals in his party. From 1934 to 1938, Stalin, he engaged in something called the Great Purge. And we see the use of purges in Nazi Germany as well. Now, the purge of the Nazi Party is historically known as the Night of the Long Knives. And it's funny that it's called the Night of the Long Knives when it took place over, 3 or 4 days here. But nonetheless, it's called the Night of the Long Knives. You can see a cartoon over here that demonstrates what's going on. That is Joseph Goebbels on the ground. Now, why the Night of the Long Knives? So Hitler was concerned that this group called the SA, also known as the Brown Shirts or the Stormtroopers, he was concerned that their loyalty, and just so you're aware, by this time there's about 2 million Brown Shirts. He is worried that their allegiance to him is questionable. And he's worried that the leader of the Brown Shirts, a guy by the name of Ernst Röhm, you can see his name there on the slide right here, Hitler feels that Ernst Röhm is a possible threat to his power. So between the 30th of June and the 2nd of July 1934, the Nazis conduct a series of political murders. They purge those who are possibly dissenting against Hitler's power. After the purge of the SA by the SS, yes, I know there's a lot of acronyms here. The SS are the ones who wear black, right? They're led by Heinrich Himmler in their fancy Hugo Boss suits. After the Brown Shirts are purged, right? This message is sent that dissent will not be tolerated amongst the Nazi Party. The remainder of the SA swear an oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler. By the way, this cartoon here is called "And Now They Salute with Both Hands." You know, the Nazis salute like this, right? Now they're doing that, but their hands are way, way up. It is that cartoon is a piece of British propaganda. All right, last couple of slides here, guys. The Nuremberg Decree. So we're looking at this chronologically. And guys, what we see here, the Nuremberg Decrees. So in 1935, the Nazis looked to enact measures to marginalize Jewish people out of German society. Once you start to marginalize, you then start to demonize. And then you start to dehumanize, and then eventually what happens is you destroy. So guys, the Nuremberg Decrees, they're basically a set of anti-Semitic laws which look to keep the purity of the Germanic blood in Germany. Remember, we talked about this in the first video about Hitler. One of Hitler's goals was to unite all Germanic people. Hitler and the higher ranks of the Nazi Party believed in this idea of Aryan superiority, right? They're the most evolved, they're the strongest, they're the smartest. And they believe that by intermingling of races, right, having Jews and Aryans come together and procreate, this was watering down the purity of the German blood, and that could not be. So the Nuremberg Decrees prohibit any non-Jewish German from marrying a Jew, right? Any Aryan from marrying a Jew, because again, it was watering down the purity of the German state. Now, these anti-Semitic laws were based upon Nazi science, right? And there's a link there right here that you should check out, and it explains this in a little bit more detail. Now, on the left side right here, what we have is basically like a lineage chart, trying to figure out who is in fact a German or who is in fact a Jew. And, you know, depending upon if, you know, you had one grandparent on your dad's side who was a Jew, right? And everyone else was quote unquote Aryan. You know, were you a German, an Aryan, or were you a Jew? So that's what this was all trying to figure out. And ultimately, guys, what they wanted to happen here is to ethnically cleanse or create an ethnically pure nation of Aryans. And then last but not least, the continued assault on the Jews in Germany culminates into what many historians regard to as the beginning of the Holocaust. This event known as Kristallnacht, also known as the Night of Broken Glass. Now, what happens on Kristallnacht? So, guys, in the span of Kristallnacht, what happens is the Nazi party starts to go after Jews in Germany. So synagogues are burnt to the ground. Jewish shops in the main cities are attacked, right? And the idea of broken glass comes from the fact that back in the days of the Nazi regime, right, at this time, most of the shops had large plate glass windows in the front of them. And the idea of the broken glass is the Nazis ransacked these businesses. They ransacked homes. They ransacked Jewish synagogues. And this was the beginning of the destruction of the Jew. And at the bottom of this slide, there is again another link that talks about Kristallnacht. And guys, basically at this point, sort of the moral teeter-totter of the nation of Germany now swings towards the acceptance of anti-Semitism. Former American journalist Mike Wallace, who was Jewish, I believe he's passed away now, he actually was part of a documentary called And They Look the Other Way. And guys, in Germany at this point, even if you had Jewish friends, there was nothing you could do about it now, because if you tried to stop the Nazis from attacking Jews, you would be seen as a Jewish sympathizer, and that made you guilty as well. So you were expected as a Aryan German to just accept the fact that Jews were not humans anymore. They were in fact parasites that wanted to destroy Germany. And of course, guys, the Holocaust plays out towards the destruction of the Jew. We see 6 million people of Jewish descent put to death, not only in Germany, but wherever the Nazis spread their empire, right? So Poland, Hungary, Romania, Soviet Union, right? We see the destruction of the Jew in all of these countries, which is just a terrible, terrible event in history. Okay, so that is it. We are done with looking at Hitler, and at this point, guys, review the content, and then you should be moving on to your quiz about Hitler and the Nazis. So smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, click the bell notification so you get notified every time I upload some juicy content, and we will see you later. Peace.